Welcome to the Rock Pile. Join us, that's Oma and Lewis, as we talk about faith, culture, and a bunch of other messy subjects. You can agree or disagree. It'll be lively, likely messy, but we hope interesting. Come on our journey to understand. No rock throwing, just a rock pile. Well, here we are, episode 2, season 3, and last episode we finished or concluded with faith from the Syro-Phoenician woman in face of culture. Now we're going to talk about the clash of culture. That's what we want to talk about today.
Yes. And, let's just start at the beginning. Look at Genesis. In Genesis chapter 6.
That's Noah.
That would be Noah. And, it talks about the fact that everybody is so wicked that the Lord is going to have him build an ark.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's wicked.
Well, and how long did it take him to build that ark?
Like 100 years?
100 years? So here he is building an ark in front of people who likely not see an ark.
Making fun of him.
Yeah, you would think they'd make fun of him, right? Telling me he's a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, you're a conspiracy theorist.
The modern day first conspiracy theorist, proven not to be a conspiracy at all. That's a conspiracy between Noah and God to do what the flood. So here's the first conspiracy theorist.
Because they looked at him as like a naysayer, you just don't want us to have fun, because they were just doing whatever felt right, and they were doing it to their heart's content, basically, and just living in wickedness.
Well, they were constantly evil on their minds and their hearts.
Yeah.
And so Noah was chosen because he was separate.
Yes. He had separated from the culture. He had to have done it early on.
Yeah. And so then he's building this ark and they see it and they don't do anything until
the rain happens.
It starts to rain. Well, actually the water comes up out of the ground. And then as Noah enters the ark, the
Lord closes the door.
The Lord closed the door behind him. And the rest of the story. So you want to read that story in Genesis chapter 6 and chapter 7. Some of you may be familiar with it already. But as we talk about cultures, think about that first culture early on. I mean, you can go back to the garden, but in this case, it's about God dealing with the culture of the day, the prevalent culture at Noah's time. And then the next one we could look at.
Let's look at Lot.
Yeah,
Let's look at Lot.
And that's still in the book of Genesis.
Yes, it is. Chapter 19.
Chapter 19. And so here before that, we had Abraham talking to God and interceding for Lot and
his whole family.
And anybody else. I think he had a long discussion where he went back and forth. Yeah. I think he started for 50 and ended up with 10.
Yes. If there's that many righteous, are you going to save them?
Yeah, 10. There's just 10.
Yeah.
Well, the only problem was there was only Lot, his wife, and 2 daughters. That's 4.
Yes, because the fiancés didn't even come.
No. And it describes the towns of Sodom and Gomorrah, those areas, and some of the issues going on for them, especially with the angels that arrived.
Yes.
Arrived.
Oh, the wickedness is the same thing consistently throughout history.
Yeah.
You've got the rise of certain lusts and desires and, deviant behaviors and idolatry and
primarily a lot of idolatry.
Yes.
Witchcraft.
Right.
Soothsayers, fortune tellers, diviners, necromancers. Those are mentioned throughout the Old Testament and even evident in some of the New Testament.
And, you look in our culture today and that's what you see is the rise of these kind of things.
And it's been there
forever.
It's like we mentioned last episode, there's nothing new under the sun. So it's the same types of behavior, just a different time frame, whether it be Noah's time or whether it be our time. Right. I mean, even you think about the history of Israel and the judges, up and down with the judges. And then essentially the prophets coming in and warning them of idolatry and some of the wicked behavior in offering sacrifices to and how they treated each other and how they treated other people, intermarrying with other groups, doing the things contrary to what God had outlined in the.
And look back at Lot. Lot, he stayed there. He knew what was going on in that culture, but he allowed himself to stay there. And he was even going to let his children marry into this culture.
Yeah.
So that's the influence. That really is when we don't separate ourselves and be separate, then you have that influence and it's going to invade your family, your life, and everything in it.
Now, especially, as you are involved or around it, and, not everybody, of course, we all come to a point where we give our life to Christ and we want to change, and the Spirit works in us. When we end up coming out of culture, and that's when we lose friends, we have to make choices. And that's not unlike some of the choices that the disciples had to make, when they followed Jesus. Jesus interacting with the culture and calling people out of it. Some would, some wouldn't. Just think about the wise young man or the wealthy young man who came and wouldn't give up all of his wealth. I mean, some of those issues that he had with those individuals when he interacted with them.
Yeah. And look at when Paul went into Corinth and he had to talk to them, he had the same thing. When you read in Corinthians in the Bible, you read about the fact that he's dealing with issues that are coming out of the culture. People are sleeping with their relatives and, stuff like that.
And temple prostitutes as well.
Yes, there was a huge thing of temple prostitutes in Corinth.
Now, that was pretty
prevalent.
Common in most of the Greek Roman types of, like Corinth. We're talking about Corinth. Aphrodite,
yeah.
And where's that? And that was in Corinth, right?
Yeah, and Philippian church had a big, what was it? I think it was Aphrodite there.
The Ephesus, they had Artemis.
Yes, they had Artemis.
Well, in Philippi, they had the fortune teller who was working for people giving fortunes, and she was probably akin to the Oracle of Delphi.
Yeah.
So kind of giving those fortunes, and she followed Paul and Silas around and basically
until he had enough of it.
And he cast out demon out of her. And then, of course, now she's not telling fortunes.
It caused havoc.
And they basically rioted because they were losing money. And that was very similar in Ephesus when he was saying that any god that is made by the hands of people or man are no gods at all. And, of course, then the silversmiths were losing business, and they rioted, and then Paul ends up in prison and beaten in Ephesus, and then followed up in prison in Philippi.
So there is sacrifice to the fact of pulling away and not being among the culture.
Or at least
you're separate.
Identifying. And, you think about, in Romans chapter 1, verses 18 through 32, you get a sense when he's writing to the church at Rome, and he mentions these same types of behaviors that are consistent with what you saw with Noah and with Lot and with, even in Israel at the time in the Old Testament, before the New Testament. And then you've got, he's going to these Greek Roman cities, very important trade cities where a lot of people would interact with from all over that known area, Corinth and Ephesus and Philippi and others.
Big commerce areas.
Yes. Yeah. Where there's a lot of interaction with individuals, not necessarily the Jewish individuals and the synagogue, but Gentiles in general.
Yes.
So their culture is not really much different to some extent than the stuff that's going on we see now.
Yes, that's true.
So, part of the issue then becomes how do we recognize what's going on in our culture, pulling away from it in a sense of not embracing it.
That's right. And, if we're going to pull away, then we need to look at how we're praying, because prayer is a big part of how we can make a difference.
Everybody can pray.
Because everyone can pray.
Now, what people might not be able to participate at a certain level, right?
That's right. I mean, you might not be able to get into politics. You might not be able to get into certain businesses or do certain things.
Or you may not have a lot of money.
Yeah. But, Isaiah 58, he talks about in verse 6 about, the whole first part of the chapter is talking about fasting. Because what comes with prayer? The Lord wants you to fast and pray.
Well, the fasting part is to get yourself in the right perspective.
Yes, it is. It's all about you.
And a sacrifice so that you have the right heart for God.
You have to have the right heart. Exactly.
Right. And it's not about you making yourself better. It's getting yourself focused
on God.
On God.
Yeah, because during that time of fast is when you're setting yourself aside and you're praying during that time, or you would have been eating.
Yeah. Well,
So it's just a focus.
Right.
It's just helping us to focus. But on verse 6, he talks about the fact that when you're going to loose the chains of the bonds of wickedness and undo the straps of the yoke and set the oppressed free, to break every yoke, he's talking about doing spiritual warfare.
Right.
Like when you're getting into your prayer closet, you're sitting there and you are praying and making a difference because you're coming against with the whole armor of God, with the whole gospel of Jesus Christ.
Right.
You're using the word of God. You're coming and you're doing spiritual warfare against the things that are going on. Because you can pray for your nation. You can pray for your city. You can pray for your family. And you should be praying for all of it.
And praying for people to have their eyes opened.
Yes.
Not in the sense of, of all these mean prayers. It's a prayer to, bless them with faith so they can see, like the Syrophoenician woman, the need or the light and to come to a knowledge of saving grace, saving faith in Christ Jesus so that they can come out of the world and be whole again. Because they don't realize the influence, and we don't even sometimes understand the full pull that the world has on us because we're so used to being in it. Sort of like Lot.
Yeah, it's like that frog in the pan, right?
Yeah.
They've got that. You turn on the heat just a little bit, and before you know it, it starts to boil. But he never jumps out because he doesn't realize it. It's so gradual.
And that's Lot.
That's Lot, but that's us.
Yeah, that's pretty much everybody.
Yes,
to some extent.
We get desensitized.
Yes, we do.
And through movies and everything. If you just pull away just for a week from things that you're watching, things that whether it's media or whatever you're listening to, pull away for just a week and just be quiet.
Or do something different.
And just be quiet with the Lord. You don't have to stop living, but if you just pull away from this media stuff.
Yeah, especially social media where it's filled with misinformation and propaganda, gaslighting. We talked about this, season 2. We didn't, of course, cover all these, but just kind of breeze through it and say, look, you got to pay attention to this world, what they're trying to feed you, because they're trying to sell you great as the Artemis. Of Ephesus.
But my point is that when you pull away, you're allowing yourself to be able to assess what's really going on.
Well,
because in the quiet, you can hear God and you can seek Him, and He's going to give you clarity on so many things. It's just a challenge. I challenge you to do that. That would be good.
Right. No, I agree. It's just that, it's the process then is to, allow something else to come into your mind other than the things that you're feeding it now.
And the busyness.
And without any judgment on what that is, or, just say, hey, if I turn this off, I stop looking at, whatever social media site that's filled with people raging back and forth, and just say, I'm going to leave that time open so I can focus on what God wants me to hear and see what happens.
Absolutely.
Because in 1 John, I think it's chapter 2, verse 15, he talks about, John, the writer of the Gospel of John in the book of Revelation. He says, essentially, Lewis is paraphrased. If you're a friend of the world, if you love the world, you can't love God because your heart is focused on the worldly things. And some of the things in the world, we're not saying everything in the world, etc., everything is evil. It's the fact is you love that stuff, and there's no room for God.
Yes.
And so, like you were saying, the point of this is to get yourself separate so that you can find out where your heart really is, because where your heart is,
you're going to follow.
That's where your treasure is. That's what you worship is. What your heart is focused on, whether it be a person, an event, or anything like that, sports, pick something. Whatever you focus all your treasure on, that's where your heart is.
Yes.
And so, no one's perfect. There's none righteous, not one in Romans.
So we just want to encourage you to pay attention to what you're looking at and what your response to culture is.
And what you're involved in.
Yeah.
What types of things you're watching and what types of things that you, your family, your children, other people are involved in, and that you're taking for granted that that's just the way it is. Because, if we look back from the things with Lot and Noah and others all the way through history, there's a consistency in those types of things are going on with the culture. And then there's a call by God in Old Testament, and then Christ calling in the New Testament to pull yourself away from that culture and to focus on God and be a positive light to that.
Yes.
So
to the people.
Yes. So show love to people, because by showing love to people, you're countercultural. It's not a selfish love. It's a love genuinely focused on the well-being of the other person.
Yes, exactly.
So if that's consistent, we can look through the Bible throughout and see what God had done in response to the wickedness of the culture. And if God is consistent, and we know he is,
oh, yes,
then we know his response based on what we've read.
The rain is coming.
The rain is coming. So I would encourage you to ask yourself, where's the ark?
Yes.
And get to the ark before it starts to rain.
Blessings.
Blessings. Well, that's a wrap. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Please subscribe and follow us on YouTube and other social media sites. We are at Cairn Global. That's global with an E. Thank you for listening to The Rock Pile.